Life Stories brings you a powerful journey of forgiveness, self-discovery, and reconciliation. In this emotional tale, a man named Lucas seeks answers about the father who abandoned him and his mother, only to discover a truth that changes everything. Through heartbreak, hardship, and the undeniable bond of family, Lucas learns that healing doesn't come from others, but from within. Join us as we dive into a story that explores the complexities of family, regret, and second chances. Subscribe to our channel to begin today's story with Life Stories. It was the coldest December evening I could remember in Boston. The wind whipped fiercely around the tall buildings, cutting through me like an unrelenting blade. Inside my office, the warmth from the fire flickered weakly against the oppressive chill in my soul. I had just slammed my crystal tumbler down onto the mahogany desk, the bourbon splashing onto the expensive papers that lay before me. It wasn't like me, really, to lose my composure, but tonight felt different. My mind spun in disbelief. My wife, Amelia, stood by the fireplace, her delicate frame trembling not from the cold, but from the tears that she refused to shed. Her emerald eyes, usually filled with warmth and life, were now shadowed by pain. She had just told me something that twisted the very fabric of my reality. "I'm pregnant," she said, her voice breaking the silence in our expansive living room. "You're going to be a father." I couldn't hear it, not for a second. My stomach clenched, and the bitter laugh that escaped from my lips was more out of disbelief than amusement. How could she say that? I had been to every specialist in the country. They had confirmed it. I was sterile, incapable of having children. The doctors had told me it was impossible. And yet here she stood, telling me a different story. "And you expect me to believe this child is mine?" I spat, my words sharp and venomous. Amelia stood her ground, but I could see the devastation in her eyes. "Richard, please. You know I've never been with anyone else. This is our miracle." The word, miracle, hit me like a slap. I had heard her, but it made no sense. My reality shattered before my eyes. "Miracle? Miracle?" I repeated bitterly. "I can't father a child. I've been told that. You know that." My words felt cold and final. And yet, as they left my mouth, I couldn't help but feel a sick emptiness growing inside of me. Amelia stepped closer, her voice soft, almost pleading. "You're the only one I've ever loved. We built this life together. Richard." She reached for my hand, but I pulled away, as if her touch was a reminder of the emptiness I had just learned to live with. The doubt that had already festered in my heart began to poison my every thought. "I've loved you for 5 years. Amelia, you know that, don't you?" But I couldn't let myself feel. I couldn't risk it. My mother had always warned me about her. She told me that Amelia was after my money from the very beginning. I had dismissed her concerns, told myself that love was enough. But now, standing in front of me, Amelia's words felt like lies. "You're after my fortune," just like she said, I accused, my voice low. Dangerous. I should have listened to her. I should have seen this coming. Her face darkened for a moment, and for the first time that evening, I saw her defy me. "Your mother didn't give me a chance," she shot back, her voice hardening. "And you're not giving our child one, either." I froze at the mention of the child. Our child. This was my reality now. This impossible scenario. My heart raced, my mind whirling with confusion. But instead of feeling love, I felt betrayal, anger, and fear all at once. The woman I had married, the woman I thought I knew, was carrying something that shouldn't have been possible. And yet, instead of embracing her, I turned to my safe, my last form of control. I knew it would be easier this way. I could erase her from my life. I scribbled down a check, an amount that could erase her existence. She didn't deserve my fortune, but she would take it anyway. I handed her the check with such force, the pen almost tearing through the paper. "Take this," I said. "Consider it severance for services rendered. Now leave." Amelia didn't even look at the check. She didn't care about the money. I could see it in her eyes. "You think you can buy me off? Pay me to leave you and your child?" she said quietly. her voice unwavering. Not my child, I corrected coldly. And yes, that's exactly what I expect. Leave, and don't ever come back. I watched her walk away, taking nothing but a small suitcase and the remnants of her dignity. By morning, she was gone, and I thought I had won. I told myself that the empty space she left behind was justified. But deep down, a hollow feeling began to settle in my chest, a feeling I couldn't quite explain. I poured another drink and tried to convince myself that my anger was righteous, that it was the right thing to do. But a part of me, the part one didn't want to face, began to wonder, what if she was telling the truth? What if I had made a mistake? 19 years passed, each year adding another layer to the silence that had separated us. Amelia had gone, leaving Boston behind with nothing but a faint echo of the life we had once shared. And me? I was left with my empire, my skyscrapers rising as tall and cold as my heart had become. I hadn't heard from her in years. She had disappeared without a trace. Or so I thought. But then, one day, my world tilted on its axis. I was sitting in my office, reviewing some property acquisitions, when I stumbled upon a news article about a new architectural marvel, a building that caught my eye. The designer's name was Bennett, and the description of the design had an uncanny resemblance to the work of my own firm. My heart skipped. Could it be? That's when I found out about Lucas. Amelia had kept him from me all these years. And yet, here he was, a living testament to a life I had abandoned. He had grown into a young man, and his architectural talents seemed to rival mine. But there was no way I could ignore the resemblance, his eyes, his hands, everything about him screamed that he was mine. I spent weeks wondering about him. What kind of man had he become? Was he like me, or had he inherited something from Amelia that I had never seen? I had lived with my doubts for far too long. And now, the time had come to confront them. One afternoon, I made my decision. I couldn't sit idly by anymore, wondering what Lucas was like. I went to Creighton Enterprises, prepared to confront the son I never knew existed. When I saw him for the first time, standing in the lobby, his broad shoulders, his posture, his piercing eyes, there was no denying the truth. This was my son, Mr. Carlson, the receptionist said, her voice formal and cool. Can I help you? I need to see Richard Carlson. Lucas replied. His voice, calm and composed, seemed to carry a weight of years of unspoken questions. I nodded, and the receptionist's expression shifted slightly. She knew who he was. I met him in my office. The very place where I had made all my decisions, where I had built my empire. But none of that mattered now. As Lucas entered, his gaze swept over the room, studying me, measuring me, as if to understand the stranger sitting behind the desk. There was no anger in his eyes. But there was something else, curiosity, pain, and perhaps a sense of betrayal. You claim to be my son, I said, not sure how to begin. The words felt foreign on my tongue, as though I was speaking a language I had never learned. I am your son, Lucas replied firmly, taking a step closer to my desk. You never looked for us. I want to understand why. His words cut through me, sharper than any criticism I had ever faced. I tried to maintain my composure, but inside, I felt the weight of my mistakes pressing down on me. I thought you were a lie, I said, my voice trembling slightly. The doctors told me I couldn't have children. I didn't believe it. I thought Amelia was betraying me. Lucas's face darkened. And you didn't even bother to find out? You just let us go? I stood, pacing the length of the room. I could feel the walls closing in around me. The business empire I had built, the wealth, the success, all of it seemed so insignificant in that moment. My son was here, and all I had was regret. I was wrong, I said finally, my voice hoarse. But I can't change what happened. I can't change the past. Lucas was silent for a long moment, studying me as if searching for something. Finally, he spoke. You made a choice, and I'm here because of it. I nodded, feeling the weight of his words sink in. He wasn't angry, he was understanding. Perhaps even more so than I was. I tried to explain myself. To offer an explanation that would make sense of everything. But the truth was, I had no excuse. I had chosen my empire over my family. And now, I had to live with the consequences. The years that followed my confrontation with Richard Carlson were filled with reflection. I hadn't expected to leave his office feeling the way I did. I thought the encounter would bring some form of closure. Some resolution to all the questions that had haunted me for so long. But instead, I felt a strange emptiness. As though the encounter had been just another in a long series of unanswered questions. I left the Creighton building. My mind still swirling with the weight of the conversation we had just had. My father, the man who had given me life, but had abandoned me without a second thought, had explained that he had doubted my mother's fidelity. His words, cold and detached, left me feeling nothing but a deep sorrow for what could have been. In a way, I felt a profound sadness for him. He had everything, wealth, power, success, but none of it could fill the void of a relationship with his son. But even with that understanding, I could not forgive him for the choices he had made. I couldn't forgive him for the years of silence, the abandonment that had shaped my entire life. I realized then that I had spent too long allowing his absence to define me. I couldn't keep carrying that burden. I had to move on. That evening, I called my mother. She had been my anchor for so long. And I needed her wisdom more than ever. "Mom," I said softly when she answered. "I went to see him." She was quiet for a moment, sensing the weight in my voice. "And how did it go?" she asked. Her tone gentle. "It was exactly what I expected," I admitted, my voice thick with emotion. "He wasn't welcoming. He didn't acknowledge me the way I wanted him to. He was just cold. And all the years of wondering about him, of imagining what it would be like to meet him, have only left me feeling empty." My mother didn't respond immediately. She understood. I could tell. I knew this day might come. "Cal, I always hoped that you wouldn't have to go looking for answers that would hurt you. But I knew you would." Her words settled over me like a blanket, comforting me in a way I hadn't expected. "You've always been enough for me, Mom," I said, my voice steady now. "You've given me everything I need. His absence, it doesn't define me anymore." She sighed softly. "I'm proud of you, Cal. I've always been proud of you." I hung up feeling lighter. Like a weight I hadn't known I was carrying had been lifted from my shoulders. I didn't need Richard's approval. I didn't need him to fill in the blanks of my past. My mother had already done that. And more. As the weeks passed, I began to rebuild my life. My time at university was a whirlwind of deadlines, exams, and projects. But through it all, I found a new sense of purpose. My focus shifted. I realized that I didn't need to chase after the ghost of a father who had never cared. I could build my own future. It wasn't until later that year, when I had completed my studies and was ready to step into the world on my own, that I received another call from my father. This time, the message was different. "I want to meet with you," he said. "I don't have much time left." I paused, unsure of how to react. He sounded different. There was a vulnerability in his voice that hadn't been there before. "What's going on?" I asked. "I'm dying, Cal. I have cancer. I don't expect forgiveness, but I want to know you before it's too late." I sat down, my breath catching in my throat. He had never shown this side of himself. And for a moment, I wondered if this was a last-ditch effort to reconcile, to connect in a way he never had before. I was torn. I didn't owe him anything. But then I thought about my mother and everything she had taught me. "You should meet him, Cal," she had said when I confided in her. "For your own sake, if not for his." And so, I agreed. I agreed to give him the chance he had never given me, to find some form of closure. For both of us. As the weeks passed, I kept my promise to my father. Every Monday afternoon, I visited him at Creighton Enterprises, watching as his health deteriorated. His once imposing figure had become frail, his voice quieter, and his eyes clouded with regret. We talked about everything and nothing, the trivial details of my life. his past mistakes, and the choices that had led us to this point. Each conversation felt like a step toward understanding, though I couldn't erase the years of absence or the pain his actions had caused. It wasn't easy. There were moments when the old bitterness resurfaced, and I had to remind myself that I didn't need his approval. But with each visit, I saw a side of him that I had never known. He was no longer the powerful, distant man who had rejected me. He was a father trying, in his own way, to make amends. And in the quiet of those moments, I began to find peace. When my father passed away, I wasn't consumed by anger or regret. Instead, I felt a strange sense of release. I had spent so many years wondering about him. And now, I had answers, not the ones I had imagined, but the ones that I needed. My life was not defined by his absence, but by the love and strength my mother had given me. And so, I moved forward. I carried with me the lessons from my past. And with each step, I built a future of my own. I knew that, in the end, it wasn't about the legacy my father had left behind, but the one I would create for myself. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to subscribe to our channel for more life stories.